Today I want to show you this cool fan kit from a company called SYY. Now I'm always on the lookout for unique, interesting new products to use in PC builds, and this fan kit grabbed my attention. Recently I've done some video work on the Lian Li Al series fans, which are very cool fans. Now this is similar in its design and function in that it's a click-together daisy-chained modular fan design with a single connection point, so it greatly simplifies your cable management. So this is about half the price of that Lian Li fan kit that I bought. This was $39.99, and I'll just cut right to the chase. It's actually a decent fan for that price. The fans are reasonably well made. They're solid. They don't feel like some of the real cheap, flexible, bendy fans that you can get. These seem pretty solid. The RGB elements look really good. And from a performance standpoint, I did do a little bit of work testing these side by side in the cooling department, which is always kind of difficult to do because everybody's results are going to vary in that. But, applying them in the same test, in both air cooling situations and behind an AIO, these were very similar in their performance with Lian Li. A Lian Li fan it is not. Lian Li has a higher RPM range than these do. The max RPM for these is 1500. Lian Li goes to 2000. And, once I cranked the Lian Li fan up to 2000, obviously it's going to beat this, and it did. But otherwise, it's fairly on par. And overall, this was able to perform well in all the cooling tests that I gave it. So I'm going to overlay some video here so that you can just look at all the RGB elements and get an idea of what these look like. And then we'll come back and talk about the basic connections to make here. So included with this fan kit are the 3 fans, obviously. Now I've got the white ones with me today, but they also do make these in black if that suits your build better. This includes a controller. Now this controller I've seen numerous times in other inexpensive fan kits, so this is just rebranded, but it's a decent controller actually. It's got RGB lighting elements included on it, so if you're going to display this somewhere, it should look pretty good. This has the 6-pin RGB PWM combined signal cable, which really just means you're not going to take standard fans and plug them into here. It's really going to be designed for this 6-pin connector. The controller also does have 2 of the 4-port LED ports, which are designed for RGB strips primarily. The other ports on here, it's SATA powered, which is a good thing. And it's got a manual switch connector, which is just a 2-pin port. Think reset switch from your case will plug into that, or a power cable, a power switch, you can plug it into there. So instead of using the remote to cycle through all of the different modes, you can use the reset switch. Now, this also comes with all of the cables to get it connected to your system and all of the screws to attach it to your case. So the first cable let's talk about is the motherboard RGB sync cable. And it connects into the controller and then uses a standard 3-pin ARGB connector. It also does have the little 3-pin VDG connector, which is basically just the same thing. Using this cable, you can sync it up with your motherboard RGB control, or in my case, I was able to sync it up with Corsair iCUE. I've got a video on how to do that if you need more information. It includes a remote, obviously, to control the controller. Now, the remote is fairly typical. It's got all of the hotkeys, red, green, blue, whites, a couple of different music modes. You can control the fan speed, including up to off. You can control all of the different RGB modes up and down. The one thing that's not intuitive about this system is the DIY function, and it took a little bit of trial and error to kind of figure that out. And basically what that is it's there are many different modes on here. Like I said before, I think there's maybe up to 80, somewhere in that ballpark of different modes you can choose. So instead of having to go through all 80 of those, as you find modes that you really like and you want to go back, there's an Add DIY button. So if you hit the Add DIY button, it puts it kind of into an internal list. And then you can just keep adding to that list. And then it has a DIY button. So you can then, instead of using the mode button, use the DIY button. And it will just cycle through the ones you've added. Then, of course, as you find those, and if you don't want them in there anymore, there's a delete DIY button as well. Play around with that. It's not real intuitive, but this is an RF remote. It's cheap, but it works just fine. So the other two cables that are included are the connection plates, is what I'm going to call them. I don't know what the technical term for it is, but this is the plate that connects onto the very end of the fan and then allows you to connect it to your system. There's two different types included with this. The first one is what you would expect. It's the 6-pin connector that goes into the controller. Simple enough. This gives you both the RGB and speed control over the fan. The other one that's included splits that up into the more traditional connection. So you get the 4-pin PWM connector and you get a 3-pin ARGB connection. This will work in a lot of situations. You do get some functionality by using the 6-pin connector as well, because you can put the controller into a motherboard sync mode. The remote has an MB button on it. You press that. Tells the controller to, instead of using its own RGB lighting sequences, it will just pick it up from the signal cable from your motherboard or Corsair. In my case, I was able to sync it with that. But it's cool that this is included should you decide to not want to use this controller. It would eliminate all of this mess, and you can go just directly to whatever control you want to get out of it. Anyways, both of those are included. One of the problems I've had with this kit is the cables on these are just abysmally short, and I'm not sure what SYY was thinking. I had to get really creative when I was putting these in the case on where to put the controller, but it really limits where you can move that controller. It's got to be close by, depending on how you implement that. Now, these fans click together nicely. The fan connections themselves are very, very tight. Basically, you're just going to engage the pins on the one side, into the other fan, and then just click them together, and it's a nice, solid, positive connection. Do that with all three of them. The connector plate on the end is basically just the same type. You're just going to slide it over the pins and lock it into position. Now, this brings up another con of this kit. This connector will fit both ways, and one way you do it, the correct way, is when the connector plate is centered in between the fans here. But you can turn it around and it still connects up just fine, but it will not work like that because the way that the pins are on the fan, they're off to one side, and the pads on the connector plate are off to that side as well. So when you reverse it in the wrong position, the pins are out of place and it doesn't work. I did that one time and it took me a minute or so to realize what I had done. Now, the other con with this connector plate, once you get it on in the right orientation, and it does kind of lock into position, but it doesn't really lock. It's easy to slide off. There's no real positive lock. Unlike when you're putting the fans together, that's a much more solid connection. Anyways, I don't know if over time maybe that connector plate would loosen up or whatnot. And I can kind of see it bowing up around the middle here where that, because those pins are kind of spring loaded, so it kind of pushes that up a little bit. Never had a problem. I've ran these for a while in the case, and they work just fine. Never had that be an issue, but I could see maybe putting a little piece of tape there just to keep that off. But I wish they'd made it so that was a more positive lock. Anyways, so those are some mild gripes about this kit. Now, as far as the RGB elements go, as noted before, as we saw before, they're on both sides. They look really good. That's one place I think where they really nailed it. It does have that eye look, which is how they've kind of sold that. So So once you get these all clicked together, you go ahead and install them just like any other set of fans, screw them in. There's some nice rubberized vibration dampening pads here that works great. And you get your connector plate installed, connected to your controller, and you should be off to the races. There's nothing too fancy about it from there. And as I mentioned earlier, overall, the performance of these fans was right on par with the Lian Li, right up until you exceed the RPM. The RPM range on this is 600 to 1500, so you know, but it cooled really, really well. I didn't have any issues, ran it in both air cooling and water cooling scenarios up against an AIO. Did fine in all of those situations. So I don't have any problems or concerns with this in a cooling situation unless you got something really crazy going on. So overall, what do I think of the SYY fans? Overall, I was pleasantly surprised with these fans. It's a solid built fan. It's not, you know, it doesn't have that cheap, flimsy feel to it. You know, I mean, it's not on the level of Lian Li, you know, if we're being honest, but, you know, for $39.99, it's a pretty decent set of fans. The RGB lighting on this looks really, really good for that price. I really like how that looks. These click together nice. They're solid. The connector plate's the one thing that I think needs a little bit of improvement. You know, they could make it so that it's maybe only goes on one way. Definitely need to make that a more solid connection. You know, not that it'll give you any problems, but it just, you know, it's one of those areas where you kind of worry that maybe it'll just come apart over time and you'll have to go in there and put it back on. SYY, the one thing you need to do is add some more cable length. You know, it's definitely not long enough. I'm not sure what the thought process was there. Charge me another $1 for the kit and, you know, add another 6, 8, 10 inches to that cable and it'll be good. But anyways, overall, I was really impressed with this, with these fans. I enjoyed playing with them. I think they look great. I'll definitely be using them. So if you have any questions, comments, concerns, or if you've used them and have an opinion of this, because you may find that you don't like these fans, let me know in the comments below what you think of them. Have you used them? What's your experience with them? So I hope you found this video helpful. If you have any questions, comments, concerns about these fans and I can help in any way, please let me know. Happy to do that when I can get to that. And that is going to do it for today. Thanks for watching.